Do you have a mediation coming up in your personal injury case? If so, you want to watch this video and learn more about the mediation process. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michael Coker. I'm a personal injury lawyer in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and today we're going to be talking about mediation, what it is, what it's like, and why you might want to consider it for your personal injury case. Mediation is a process where all the parties involved in a case get together and try to settle it with the assistance of what's called a mediator. Now, a mediator in Georgia is an individual, often they're retired lawyers who have either done personal injury work or defense work in their career, who basically will facilitate a discussion between the parties to try to see if they can get the case resolved. Now, I will tell you this, in many of my cases, when I went to mediation, I thought there was no chance that the case would settle based on conversations that I had had with the defense lawyer and our inability to make any movement in the settlement. And yet, when the mediator stepped in, when the mediator got involved and basically discussed different options we had or different negotiation techniques, we ultimately were able to settle the case. So be optimistic when you go to mediation and give it your best good faith effort to settle the case, because many cases can settle at mediation even when you don't think there's any chance there is. So let's talk a little bit about the mediation process, what happens, what it is, and what you can expect. Mediation is typically done in person or online through like a Zoom platform or Teams meeting. I always prefer my mediations be in person because I think there's nothing better than getting everyone in the room together to talk about a case. Now, as I mentioned, most mediators are experienced lawyers in Georgia that have done this before or that they have practiced and maybe they're retired. But not all mediators are lawyers. Sometimes mediators, particularly in domestic cases like divorce or child support, are just lay people who do not have a law degree or who are not practicing lawyers. And so it varies based on the type of case. But for my cases, I typically always used an experienced lawyer mediator just because they understand the legal issues a little bit better. And so typically in my mediations, they happen with a certain process. First, when you arrive, the first thing you're going to do is probably talk to your lawyer about what to expect in the mediation. And a great lawyer is going to sit down with you, is going to answer all your questions, and tell you exactly what's going to happen. The next step is both parties typically meet with the mediator and their lawyer in private. And so I'll sit there with my clients, we'll have a discussion, and then ultimately the mediator will come in and kind of talk about his or her process, about what to expect, the type of mediator they are, and kind of their role in the day. Now, a great mediator will immediately make your client feel comfortable and happy and understanding of what is going to happen that day in the process. And so I always encourage you to pick a mediator that does that makes everyone feel comfortable, that can take a serious situation and make everybody feel at ease. And so typically the mediator will come in and do that. And then the mediator will go speak with the other parties that are there also in mediation. The next step is, in Georgia, it's very common for all the parties to come together for the start of the mediation. And basically all the parties get together, everybody shakes hands, says hello, is cordial and professional, and then ultimately in Georgia, both sides typically give what's called an opening statement. And now, in my cases, that's typically just done by the lawyer. I typically put together a PowerPoint all about you, all about your case, all about how this affected you, because ultimately the insurance company representative will typically also be at these mediations. And so we want that insurance adjuster to see you, see the effect that the accident had on you, and to learn more about why this is a big case. You know, for many insurance adjusters, it's just a number or a file. And so it's my goal in that opening statement to really humanize you and make that adjuster realize the human connection behind the file. And so typically I'll give an opening statement. I'll talk about the accident. I'll talk about the injuries, the medical treatment, and then I'll talk a little bit about any prior negotiations that have been done. Then it'll be the defense's turn, or the defense lawyer for the insurance company will then give their opening statement. and they'll talk about strengths that they feel with their case. Maybe there's a liability issue and they think either my client's at fault or somebody else is at fault. Or maybe they'll have issues with causation. They'll say, listen, we believe that my client has medical conditions that needed medical treatment. We just don't feel like they were caused by the accident. They were caused by either degeneration or old age or some other factor. Or they'll come in and just have very little to say and say, we look forward to working together. And so don't be alarmed if the other attorney says something that, maybe makes you angry or seems disrespectful. They're just doing their job by explaining the strengths of their specific case. I always tell my clients, this is a great opportunity for you to show off your poker face. Don't get angry. Don't get upset. Just sit there, smile, and listen to what the other attorney has to say. Then, in most of my mediations, the parties will separate again. And we'll stay in one room, me and my client, and then the insurance company representative and their lawyer will go to the separate room. And then the mediator will basically go back and forth between the two rooms and basically will provide settlement offers. So typically the plaintiff will make a demand and will say, this is the amount that we demand to settle the case. The mediator will walk that over to the other room and then to the other attorney and the insurance representative, and they'll make what's called a settlement offer. They'll bring that back to the plaintiff. And basically what we'll do is we'll work together a little bit at a time to chip away until we get to a number that's close and maybe we can settle the case. One of the things I want to caution you is many people who don't do this for a living put a lot of stock in the midpoint of those two numbers. So they say, well, we can't come down very much because the midpoint is here. Now, the midpoint in a mediation is important, but it's not the number you need to worry the most about. Your lawyer's job, if you're the injured party, is to push the insurance company to their top number until they say, we're done, that's all we're going to pay, take it or leave it. And so if you have a great lawyer that gets them to that number, there's going to be some strategy in how they get there, whether they move a big chunk, a little chunk at a time. A lot of my clients are frustrated. They're like, well, I don't understand why we moved $20,000 and maybe the defense lawyer only moved up $10,000. It seems like it's going to be unfair, right, that we're giving up more ground. But the reality is a truly experienced attorney who does a lot of these mediations is going to understand exactly the strategy to get them to that top number. Because at the end of the day, your demand doesn't mean as much as the money that's on the table that you can take. And so once we get them to that top number, once we basically say, hey, this is all that we're going to pay, that's when my client and I sit down, we have a conversation, we do the math of exactly what the client's going to get in their pocket, and then ultimately it's their decision as to whether or not they want to settle or whether or not they want to file a lawsuit or go to trial in the case. And so the mediator will do this. Some mediations take an hour, some mediations can take 8 hours. It just depends. As long as that insurance company is continuing to put more money on the table, we are going to stay, because we are not going to walk away until we hear them say, this is our top, we're not paying another penny. Now, 2 tips for mediation. First, let's say you're somebody who does not want to go to court, does not want to go to trial. That is going to be the ace up your sleeve. You do not want to disclose that to anyone except for your lawyer. Because if the other side finds out that you really don't want to go to court, don't want to go to trial, they're immediately going to lowball you, and that top number they're going to offer is going to be substantially less than if they believe that you're ready to go to court and you're going to take it the distance. So always remember to, even if you don't want to go to court, don't want to go to trial, don't let the other side find that out in a mediation. Secondly, remember that everything you say at mediation is a review on you as a witness in your case. And so if you kind of get angry or say something nasty to the other attorneys, that's only going to hurt you in the long run, because it's going to show that other attorney, hey, when this individual gets up on the witness stand, I can make them angry, I can make them frustrated, and I can make a jury dislike them. And so always remain respectful, always remain kind to everybody at a mediation, and be sure that you are presenting yourself in the best light possible. Typically, mediations can be court ordered, meaning that the judge wants you to do a mediation or is requiring you to do a mediation, or they can just be at the suggestion of a party. Don't read too much into whether or not a mediation is court ordered or not. I've had cases settle that on court ordered mediations and mediations where the parties got together. So again, when you go to mediation, always have an open mind and an open idea of what may happen, because you might be surprised at exactly what they offer. And it might be something that you can live with to settle. Because ultimately, the last consideration for mediation is the cost, both the time investment, the financial investment, and the emotional investment of what it's going to take a case to trial. So if you settle a case at mediation, that means that everybody came together. Nobody might be happy. They say the best settlements are when everybody's a little frustrated. But the reality is it's a settlement that you control. And you're not putting your decision up to a jury or a judge, a bunch of strangers that you don't know. You're not putting your life on parade and on display. Ultimately, you're the one making the decision to settle the case. And if you decide to walk away and not settle at mediation, that's your right, that's your prerogative. But you need to factor in the amount of time that it's going to take to continue to get the case all the way to a trial and maybe any appeals that may come after. I mean, sometimes it can be a 2-year process after mediation before everything's wrapped up and resolved. You need to consider the financial aspect. So for most personal injury cases, those expenses are going to continue to accrue, and in most cases, those will come out of your bottom line. So you might end up with less money at the end of the case than if you settled now. But the most important thing is the emotional toll that a trial makes. Testifying, putting your life on display, it's stressful and it can be emotional for people. And so there's a certain value to that, of the peace of closing that chapter of the book, of making sure the case is resolved at mediation on your terms and not on the terms of a judge or a court at some indefinite time in the future. All these are factors that you need to consider, that you need to think about if you have a case heading to mediation. If you think that you might be interested in having your case resolved at mediation, or if you want to talk to a lawyer who maybe has experience doing personal injury mediations and needs some advice, I would always encourage you to call our office. It's a free call. We can talk about what mediation options are available for you in your case, and we can have a discussion. And I would be more than happy to share my experience and my knowledge with you to help you understand what you can expect and in the value of your case at mediation. So I put these podcasts out periodically. I give legal updates to people who want to know more about Georgia law. So if it's something you're interested in and you feel like you learned something today, I would encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast and continue to get these legal updates periodically so you can stay informed. But for today, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.